Hi everybody, for today's video I want to read to you guys the short story called The Art of Emotion that I recently finished writing. And all I really wanted to say before I started reading was, if you do want to share this, all I ask is that you credit me. So thank you guys so much, and let's get reading. The Art of Emotion, a short story by Danielle Jameson. I glared into his eyes, so lifelike and caring. Every little detail was carefully sculpted and thought about, from his dark, muddy brown eyes and hair to each line of age on his face. Each strand of his thick hair was neat and swept to the left-hand side of his face, leaving only minimal hair on the right. Of course, who could forget the scar which cursed his face and branded him a man who fought many battles and had almost lost one. For quite some time, I remained speechless and studied in depth every part of his being. He looked fatigued, drained, and somewhat tired of the cards that fate had dealt him. Someone who was once a triumphant man was simply standing in front of me, a tear of regret almost escaping an eye. As I continued to gaze deep into his soul, I wondered if he was capable of feelings. Is this man capable of regret? What was going through his mind was clearly exhausting him. Was this me imagining a kinder gentleman standing in front of me? Is he questioning his life choices? Is this actually something real and believable? I couldn't fathom the situation and struggled to provide him with a coherent sentence. All the while, he couldn't look me in the eyes. Dowd, a legendary figure, was now nothing more than a stone-cold statue. For all I thought he could be capable of releasing emotions, I knew he was not. His frosty heart will never melt, and his body will forever be made of unbreakable brick. As I turned to say my final goodbye, no expression appeared on his face. As I tried to hide a tear which showcased my sadness, I waved my final goodbye and left the prison a broken little girl who would soon be fatherless. Growing up, I believed my father was a cursed and complicated man, a one you would never want to mess with. One moment he was in my life and the next he was not, and I distinctly remember my deranged mother giving me some kind of lies and excuse as to what was going on. However, I wasn't stupid, and like many children, I was a sponge, taking in and absorbing what was taking place in front of my face. Time after time, my father would never learn his lesson, taking things that were not his to take, including lives. He was obsessed with gangs and playing God. Taking people from this earth was not his job, but he would not accept it. He dabbled in the dangerous and illegal side of life, which eventually caught up to him in the biggest way. He would trade his soul in to the devil and face the consequences for his actions by the death sentence. I never felt as though I knew who my father really was. I only know him as a man with so many faces. Sly and selfish, mean and blunt. However, I also knew deep down there had to be emotion inside of his heart. At times the way he smiled seemed meaningful, full of love and care for me. Everyone has emotions, don't they? If not, that makes them inhuman. How could anyone function in their day-to-day life with nothing but eyes as dark as the void and a soul as empty as could be? However, the blank expression on his face and lack of words for our final goodbye allowed me to sum up his character like never before. Dowd, a legendary figure, is my father, who was now paying the ultimate price for his actions. The man I saw in the cell behind the bars was not my father. He was a figurine or a statue, if I will. Every detail was meticulously shaped and sculpted to create a living being with no ability to comprehend emotion. And as I cry myself to sleep, I tell myself that he is someone who is incapable of love for his family and is only happy when he is meddling with the law. I was born into a life full of regret, abuse, and hatred, a life of which I would rather forget. Similar to my father, my mother also had a venomous heart, overflowing with rage and pain, all of which was infused with alcohol. At one point, my heart didn't have to crave her attention because I had it all. My father had completely destroyed her, but when they married, she made a pact that she would always stay by his side. She turned to alcohol, and every time I saw her, I remember a bottle glued to her hand. Whenever she was intoxicated and controlled by the poison that was booze, I always became a target for anger and hurt. These heartbreaking memories never disappear, but torment my soul by forcing me to relive the scary moments every night. When I close my eyes, my brain doesn't rest, and my stomach churns with nausea and anxiety. I remember when I first saw this monstrous side of my mother, and my brain burns at the thought of it. I never understood why I was the way that I was until I began analysing my past and background. And I quickly realised that my default emotions whilst developing into a young woman were anger and anxiety, pain and hurt. I am not sure why people do what they do and how some of us can think that certain actions are okay. But all I know is that emotion is an art form. We paint our emotions, which represent our lives and our feelings. Many of us wear our emotions on our sleeves for all to see. However, some of us hide our emotions and prefer to remain a mystery, painting pictures of the void and the darkness. I realise that as much as I try to understand everybody, it is impossible. Both my parents' pictures were hazy, distressed and confusing, and I will never know the true art of their emotions. My arms tightly grasped his short brown hair like my life depended on it, and I felt his hands cuddle me in a comfortable and protective manner. It all came rushing back to my brain, as if an old black and white movie was playing back in my head. I attempt to rid the memories out of my brain and shake my head furiously, but I try with no success. After a quick cuddle and a peck on the top of my head, he laid me down in my bed, tucked me in nicely and asked which children's book I'd like to read with him tonight. "Little Red Riding Hood," I shouted with excitement. I pinch my right arm tightly, sending a strong stinging sensation up my arm. "Ouch," I whisper in pain. Despite the self-inflicted pain, I was happy that I was focused on something other than my past for one brief second. At this point, my brain was completely in control of what I thought about, and there was nothing that I could do to distract it. "Daddy," I asked sheepishly. "What do you want?" he snapped back, as he glared at me with hate in his eyes, a bottle of cider attached to his left hand, with what seemed to be with superglue. "Can you read me a bedtime story?" my 4-year-old self pleaded. He rose from his chair, clenched his fists, and gritted his teeth as he began moving closer to me. My heart started to beat fast, and I felt each thump like it was going to escape from my chest. As he arrived directly in front of me, he continued to stare into my eyes. We stood in silence for a few seconds, until he leaned forward into my personal space. "You want a bedtime story?" he questioned. I nodded my head in agreement. "Well, isn't that sweet?" With that, he grabs my right hand, gripping onto it with harsh pressure, and he drags me up the stairs into my bedroom. "My little girl wants a bedtime story. Which one should we have today? Each time a word escaped his mouth, I smelt the strong, overpowering scent of alcohol. He was intoxicated, stumbling over his words and struggling to hold himself upright. This was another memory I wished would leave my mind and never return. I could feel my hands sweating just at the thought of reliving my past and dwelling on what happened next. So guys, that was it. That was my full short story called The Art of Emotion. And really, I wanted to share this with you guys because I feel like a lot of people do this, and sometimes I think that we don't realise that we do this. but I spent a lot of years trying to just understand why people did what they did and why they behaved the way that they did. And it got to the point where it was very much consuming my entire life. And I was dwelling so much on the past and what had happened, and I was trying to wrap my head around it, that it definitely became, I became corrupt a little bit, and I lost my personality and a bit of my true self because of that. And I think that story represents that. It's someone that you love so much, like, you know, a father, a mother, and you see them and they have changed, or they're not the person that you thought that they were. And that is incredibly difficult to digest, I think. And that's what this story represents. So I do very much hope that you enjoyed. Like I mentioned, if you do share this in any way, all I ask is that you credit me. So thank you so much. If you liked this, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, click on the subscribe button. And I hope to see you guys in my next video.